Today we're going to talk about using order of operations involving integers to solve mathematical and real-world problems. I want you to think just for a second. When you're getting ready, you have to put your socks on before you put your shoes. When you're baking a cake, you have to turn the oven on before you can put the mixture in. Okay? When you're driving a car, you have to make sure the car is in neutral. You have to turn on the car before you can start the car. All right, so just like all of those things, math also has an order which you must do things. Okay, and our operations are the four mathematical operations that we're going to be talking about: add, subtract, multiply, and divide. All right, so what we're going to call this is we call it GEMDAS. Okay, GEMDAS. Now, when you were in elementary school, you may have heard it be called PEMDAS, okay, because that first thing was parentheses. But as you get older, you're going to find that you're going to have more than just parentheses, okay? And so that G is going to represent grouping symbols. And so it does include our parentheses. Okay, it also includes, which we're going to use today, is some brackets. It also includes absolute value, which we recently learned about, and it even includes a fraction. A fraction is a grouping symbol. All right, the E is going to represent exponents. Okay, and an exponent is like, for example, if I had 4 to the power of 2, the 2 represents the exponent. And we'll learn a little bit more about those later. All right, and multiplying and dividing, okay, this goes from left to right. So I want you guys to think about when you're reading a book. All right, so multiplying or dividing, and whichever one happens first in your number sentence, your mathematical sentence, you're going to read it first. So if division comes before multiplication, you're going to divide before you multiply. And the same is true about adding and subtracting. Okay? If subtraction comes before adding, then you're going to subtract before you add. All right, so let's look at this first problem together. We have 40 minus, in those brackets, 13 plus 2 times times negative 4, all divided by 5, okay, because that fraction means to divide. Now, when we look at this, all right, you're going to do everything that's all together on top first. All right, so we have to look inside of our brackets. And inside of our brackets, you see that set of parentheses. Well, the parentheses don't mean that you do that first here. They mean that you're going to multiply. The parentheses here represent multiplication. So I like to underline each step that I'm going to do, and you always do the strongest step first. All right, so that's what we're going to be looking at. We got to do the strongest step first. So you have to do everything on the top before you can look at the bottom. All right, so I'm going to underline that step that I'm going to do. So it's going to be 2 times negative 4, and 2 times negative 4 is a negative 8. Put that divided by 5, because that's also what it would look like. All right, so then I'm going to come over here and I'm going to subtract, or I'm not going to subtract, let's look at this first. 13 plus a negative 8. Okay, so ask yourself, do I have more positives or do I have more negatives? Well, we have more positives, so we know our answer is going to be a positive, but you're adding integers that have unlike signs, so that means that you subtract them. So 13 minus 8 is a positive 5. All right, so then we have 40 minus 5 divided by 5. All right, so then what we're going to do is we're going to look at that. We're going to simplify on the top, the numerator. 40 minus 5 is 35. And 35 divided by 5, 5 goes into 35 7 times. So here my answer is 7. All right, so we just simplified that expression. All right, let's look at like number 2 with the boxes in the middle of it. It says, which of the following expressions has a value of -6? All right, so what we're gonna do here is we're gonna have to solve each expression to see which one of them equals -6, and then we'll circle yes or no if it falls in that category. So if it equals -6, then we will say yes, it will equal -6. All right, so let's look at letter A. Letter A is pretty easy. All right, so I have 8 plus -2 times 7. So GMDOS, I don't have a grouping symbol, okay, because those parentheses represent multiplication. I have no exponent, but I do have multiplying and dividing. So I'm going to multiply -2 plus 7. -2 times 7 is a -14. So I have 8 plus a -14. Okay, do I have more positives here or do I have more negatives? I have more negatives, and it's an addition problem. So I have 14 minus 8 because it's adding opposites. Okay, so I have more negatives, so my answer is going to be a -6. Ooh, look, it does represent what I'm looking for, so I'm going to circle yes here. All right, we're going to go to C because B's got that fraction in there. We're going to save it for just a second. So let's look at C because C looks a little bit easier. All right, so do I have a grouping symbol? No, I don't. Okay, do I have an exponent? No, I do not have an exponent. Okay, but I do have multiplying and dividing and adding and subtracting. So I'm going to do the multiplying and dividing first from left to right. All right, so I have -3 minus 6 plus 3 times 5. So I have underlined 3 times 5. 3 times 5 is 15. I'm going to rewrite it. All right, so I'm done with multiplying and dividing. And now I have my adding and subtracting. But in this case, I'm adding or subtracting integers. So when I have adding or subtracting integers, I have to follow those special rules for integers. All right, so let's go from left to right because subtracting happens before addition here. So when you're subtracting integers, I want you to remember the rule here. You're going to actually add the opposite. And so what I did here is I'm going to, because I'm not going to worry about plus 15 right now, I'm just going to look at -3 minus 6. I like to follow the rule of keep, change, opposite, because remember, we're adding the opposite. So I'm going to keep that -3. I'm going to change the subtraction sign to addition. And the opposite of +3 is -6. I'm sorry, back up. The opposite of +6 is -6. So I'm going to rewrite that. And then I'm going to go ahead and add in my 15 there. So it just makes it easier when you go ahead and just change it all to addition. So I have a -3 plus a -6 because you're going from left to right. So you have a negative plus a negative. And if you did snakes and humans, that's like snakes plus more snakes. All right, so you have a -3 plus a -6 is a -9 plus 15. All right, do I have more positives here or do I have more negatives? You have more positives, so your answer is going to be a positive. And the difference between 15 and 9 is 6. So it's still 6, but it's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a negative 6. All right, so letter C is not correct. All right, so let's look at letter B. Let's go back to B. Remember we skipped it a while ago because it had a fraction and I wanted you to have a little bit more just straight numbers across. All right, so let's go back to that one. And we've got a negative 16 minus, or sorry, this neighbor's having difficult. 16 divided by 4 minus negative 5 plus 2 times 3 minus a negative 3. Woo, that's a lot. All right, so let's go back up to GMDOS again. All right, so we're looking at that group, all right? So, ooh, goodness, this is a big one. So I actually see two different groups. I see a group with 16 divided by 4, and then I see inside of my parentheses a negative 5 plus 2 times 3. All right, so just when you have a more than one grouping, you're going to go from left to right. So we're going to start here at 16 divided by 4. 16 divided by 4 is 4 minus negative 5 plus 2 times 3 minus a negative 3. All right, so we still have that extra group. So we're going to go within our group now and go and do our order of operations within that group. So 2 times 3 is 6. So I'm rewriting the whole problem. Still haven't gotten rid of that group. So I'm asking myself, do I have more positives than I have negatives, or negatives and I have more positives? So 6 minus 5 is a positive 1. All right, so here I have minus. I'm subtracting my integers. All right, so if we go ahead and we change it, let's just look at changing it to, or let's just go from left to right. Okay, so left to right tells me 4 minus 1 is a positive 3. So here's where it gets a little sticky because we have that subtracting a negative integer. All right, so remember what we did the last problem? We did that keep, change, opposite. So I'm keeping my first number. And you're changing because you're adding the opposite. So I'm going to change that to an addition sign. And what's the opposite of negative 3? The opposite of negative 3 is going to be positive 3. So now I'm going to add 3 plus 3 is 6. So this is going to be equal to a positive 6. So is that what I'm looking for? No. All right, let's look at the last question. The last question here is going to help me with, is it going to be a negative 6 or is it going to be something else? All right, so I have, let me erase really quickly. And I know there's not a whole lot of space here, so if sometimes you want to do it on a piece of paper, that's helpful. Whatever your teacher says is going to be better for you. I don't know, it didn't erase. All right, so let's look at this letter D. We have negative 5 plus 7 plus 2 times 2 plus a negative 24 divided by 2. All right, so let's look at that GMDOS. GMDOS is going to tell me that I need to go from left to right. I do not have a grouping here. The parentheses actually mean to multiply, or they're setting a number apart. So when I look at this, I'm going to go with 2 times 2. 2 times 2 is 4. So I have negative 5 plus 7 plus 4 plus a negative 24 divided by 2. All right, so I still have that multiplying and dividing operation. So I'm going to underline it, and I'm going to have negative 24 divided by 2. Negative 24 divided by 2 is going to be, remember when you're dividing or you're multiplying here, you have a negative and a positive is going to give me a negative number. All right, and this is kind of nice because it's already all going to be addition. So I have negative 5 plus a positive 7. I have more positives, so that's going to give me a positive 2. 7 minus 5 is 2. Okay, plus 4 plus a negative 12. So 2 plus 4 is 6. 6 plus a negative 12. Do I have more positives or do I have more negatives here? I have more negatives, so my answer is going to be a negative, and the difference between 12 and 6 is our negative 6. So the answer here is indeed negative 6. All right, so that last question, let's look at the last question with Anna, or Anna, depends on how she wants to say her name. All right, so Anna bought, why it's not erased on. Anna bought 4 shirts for $8 each and 2 skirts for $11 each. She gave the cashier $80. The amount of change Anna received can be represented by the expression shown. The good news is that they've already given us this expression. All right, so if we look at the word problem, we know that she's purchasing 4 shirts for $8 each and 2 skirts for $11 each. So when we are looking at doing that, we know that it's going to be a multiply. We're grouping those together. So we could either add 8 4 times, but the easier solution is to multiply 8 times 4. Or on the skirts, we could add 11 twice, or we could multiply 2 times 11. So that's what we've already done here. We've already given you guys the equation. So within our group, okay, within our group, we're going to go from left to right. Okay, so we have 4 times 8 is 32 plus 2 times 11. All right, 2 times 11 is 22. So I have 32 plus 22 inside of my brackets. So inside my brackets, I'm going to add those together. And I know that it's 54. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to say 80 minus 54. 80 minus 54. Ooh, unless I'm going to have to actually put those on top of each other because I know I'm going to need to borrow from that 8 or carry over from that 8. So I can't do 0 minus 4 is, I'm going to borrow from here. This becomes a 7 and makes this a 10. Okay, so 10 minus 4 is 6. And 7 minus 5 is 2. So how much change would she receive from her $80 purchase? She's going to receive $26. All right. And that is how you would use order of operations to solve mathematical and real-world problems.